The first of the Photoshop assignments is actually a pretty quick one. The basic idea is that we're going to bring in the picture of the Caprisun girl, and it could literally be any other picture, put it over a gradient background, and then use an effect to give it an irregular edge. There are a few steps to the process, but one of the first things that it actually has us do is create a background to use with the image, and it's a pretty small background. The size that's listed says make it a 640-480, and that's pixels, not inches. So 640 pixels by 480 pixels at resolution 72. I'm going to click on create, and I'll get this little window here that I can zoom in on as I need to. I got a lot of extra palettes open, which is really making my work area extremely crowded, which I do not care for. And let me see if I can do a better workspace than this. Is painting it? No, painting's worse. Okay, so my basic idea is I'm going to minimize any of those palettes that I don't need. This is Photoshop 2020. If you're working in Photoshop 2019 or 2018 or whatever, it's going to be fine. Yours just may look very slightly different than mine. This is the 640-480 background. I'm going to open the Caprisun girl picture, which in my case is on my desktop, but you would need to have saved that down from the Blackboard location, so you would, actually not be trying to open it from Blackboard. You need to save it off of that platform first, and then you've got it. Now, at the moment, I have two separate open documents. I have my with the custom size that I created before, and I have the Caprisun girl. I need to get her into that other document, and there's a ton of ways of doing that in Photoshop. I'm going to show you a couple of them, not in sequence, but just sort of as we go through and do different things. But just know that any way that you can get it one file into another is fine. They end up with basically the same end result. The way I actually really like to do this with is using the layer palette. At the moment, my layer palette is not expanded, but I certainly can do so. And I use this the majority of the time when I am trying to move stuff in between, just because I find it pretty clean. And again, one method is all you have to have that works. So if you like this one that I'm about to show you, you can use it. If you don't like it going forward, you can use something different. The only layer that is currently in the file is active and selected. That's important. I'm going to come over to the pull-out menu on the side. I need to literally pull this further out so you can see it. Pull-out menu on the side, and the option I'm looking for is called Duplicate Layer. Once that pops open, it asks me what I want to call the new layer. So I could call this Caprisun. And the most important part is below that, where it says Destination. If I don't change anything and I just click on OK, Caprisun Girl is going to have two layers of the same stuff. I'm going to click OK just so you can see it, but that's not what we wanted to do. I didn't want to copy inside of this file. I wanted a copy of this inside of the other one. So I'm going to undo. I'm going to go back into that palette, do the duplicate layer function again, call it Caprisun again. And this time, instead of just leaving it the way it's set, I'm going to pick one of the other options from the list. If I hadn't already created the new document, new would be an option for me. And that will always it'll create a new layer in an entirely new document. But I want the one that's called, in my case, currently Untitled 1. That's my 640-480 white background document. I'm going to click OK. Caprisun Girl is not going to look different. It's telling me that I'm moving it to a different color space. That's fine. I'll click OK. But Caprisun layer, or the original, doesn't look different, and that's exactly as it should be, because the change was made to an exterior document. So I can close this one because I don't need it anymore. And now when I look, I have a close-up of her hair, and that's because the image is much larger currently than the background area that I've got set up for it. So I will need to scale this one. You can do it several ways, but the easiest way in many cases is to use the free transform. I'm going to do edit. I'm going to go down and choose Free Transform, which gives me a Command T or Control T, and then I get a bounding box around this. I'm going to scale from the corner, and I'm going to do Shift, and that's because I want to make sure I'm scaling this proportionally. I don't want to distort the image, so I'm going to have to do it a bunch of times over and over and over again, or I could zoom out so I could see a greater percentage of the image all at once. And I'm holding my Shift and I'm not doing it correctly, so for some reason it is not scaling proportionally. That is odd. Alright, I'm not really sure where things went awry, but it should. Yeah, nope, it's not doing it proportionally, even with the Shift held down. Alright, so if you're running into the problem like I am, which is odd, let's see. Now, no, it's still not working with the Shift. I don't know. But if I don't hold the Shift, it is working. Okay, somehow or another into the 2020 version, which this is literally the first time I've ever opened it, they changed the fact that the Shift key used to constrain the proportions, and they have them auto-constrained. So when you add the Shift key, it undoes what I am accustomed to. So I apologize for that. That's a little weird, but that is in fact what's going on. And so if you're running into the same issue, that's why. In at least version 2020, the aspect ratio in my case was linked, which means it was locked and proportional. By adding the Shift modifier, I made it non-proportional, which is unusual, but okay. Once you get it scaled downward, you're going to press the return key or use the check mark in the upper part of the screen to apply the changes. And I now have a smaller version of Caprisun Girl, and I've got the background. So I have this basic setup that I need for this with one exception. I don't currently have the brushes that I'm going to need to create the edge effect that I'm looking for. For those, we're going to have to go to DeviantArt. DeviantArt is a website that essentially people contribute content to, and I did a search. In my case, I did watercolor splatter brushes because I'd found one earlier that I liked, and it came up too far down the list when I was trying to show you guys, but it's this third one over. I apologize in advance for the names of some of the creators and some of the files. In DeviantArt, there's some definite not appropriate for work or class, but the brushes themselves may be okay. What you're specifically looking for in DeviantArt is Photoshop compatible splatter brushes. If you wanted to put that in your search field, you can. The one I'm picking is called Watercolor Splatters. Once I do that, it's going to take me to this page. I would scroll down and I would use the download button. Now, it made me sign in, and it made me create an account and sign in. Once I did that, before I could download it, had me choose whether or not I wanted the free option or whether I wanted to purchase points. Don't purchase anything. Free is going to be fine, but you will have to set up that account. All right, so once you have downloaded the file and you've got the piece, mine looks like this once it's unzipped. What you are specifically looking for is a folder that has a .abr file extension once it's unzipped. That ABR is an Adobe brush extension, and that's what we need for the brush part once we get into Photoshop. So just know that either you're looking for a format that lists itself as an ABR, or you're looking for something that describes itself as doing Photoshop brushes and then is a zip download. You unzip it, you can't load the brushes from inside of a zip file, and you'll then load these ABRs in, and I'm going to show you how to do that part. Alright, so Photoshop's here. I'm going to open my brush palette, and if you don't see yours, you can always get to it under the window menu. And on the right hand side of the brush palette, we have, I'm going to scoot mine in so you can see it better. We have the option of get more brushes, and that will allow us to browse to these exterior brushes that are preloaded but not yet in our system. It'll also let us go to Adobe and get some. Don't want to do it that way though. That's the obvious option, but that's not the one we want. And apparently I closed my brush palette, so let's get back to that. Oh, no, there it is. Instead of that one that's to get more brushes, which again seems like the one you would want, but it's not. So skip that one, but what you're looking for is import brushes. And this allows you to browse to any folders that you've downloaded that have the specific brushes in it and so forth. And mine is called something I can't remember in this moment, but it is on my desktop and that helps. So let's see. Apparently, oh no, there it is. Watercolor, splatter, I don't know, the first word in it is watercolor. The only item that shows up as highlighted, which is the only one that it recognizes as a proper brush format, is the correct one. So I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to click on Open. And it will do what is called appending in my case, meaning it adds to the existing menu of brushes. I've added some in the past, but so I do have a bunch of brushes in mine. The bottom of mine has the watercolor ones because those are the most recent ones that were inserted in here. If I expand the set, I'm able to see what these look like, and apparently they're showing up as dried blood splatter, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. They look strange when they're used in a streaky format because that's not how they're intended to be used. But they're in here, and so that's what I needed for the moment. So just know that the loading of the brushes is important. We're not going to use them quite yet, but we will be coming back to those certainly. And I'm going to put mine back over in my palette area and move on to the part that I do need to work on now. I'm going to turn off Caprisun Girl by clicking on the little eye beside it. I'm going to go to the background layer, and at this point I'm ready to do my gradient. I'm going to pause and restart the video with the gradient, and then hopefully we can get through the rest of the assignment with that second video.